Instagram. So this video is not going to be just me. This is me and Lisa Wood. So I'm going to go right away and see if I can get Lisa to join this video because we want to talk about something together. So she's not quite here yet. So basically Lisa and I are both English teachers and also coaches. So although we both teach English, we also have a coaching background as well. I can see Lisa is here, so I'm just going to invite her to join if I can. So I've not done this before. There we go. Come on, Instagram. There we go. Perfect. Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. What's the weather like for you in Spain?
Oh, it's a beautiful day today. I was hoping to do this outside, but I don't think the Wi-Fi would quite reach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Not so
we've
good
got.
in the UK.
It's been raining. It's been raining quite a lot, which probably isn't really surprising. I think most people associate the UK with rainy weather.
Yeah, yeah. It does rain a lot here where I am in Galicia in Spain. It's called Green Spain because it rains a lot more than it does in other parts of Spain.
Does that make you feel at home as a kind of expat
Absolutely.
Brit? Cool. So, Lisa, tell us a little bit about the idea for these sessions and also for today, because this is something a bit special, I think.
Yeah, well, I can't quite remember when we first connected, but I think we realized we had some things in common, and we shared some ideas about how we can best help our learners to learn more efficiently and to enjoy the process of learning.
Mm.
And my background is well, I actually started my teaching life as a French teacher in the UK. And then I got my master's in education. I taught for a couple of years. And then I decided to run away to Spain. So um, I ran away to Spain and I then qualified as an English teacher. Although I did study English as part of my degree and anthropology. So that gives you an idea of what I'm interested in, being a language geek, and I call myself a culture junkie sometimes because I just love exploring new cultures and learning new languages. So I started teaching English in Spain, and then I moved around for a while. I taught in Hong Kong, Egypt, Portugal, France, and finally settled here in Spain. And I've been teaching in a secondary school, teaching English to adolescents for the past 16 years. And in 2019, I qualified as a neuro language coach. Um, really, the coaching side has always been with me. It wasn't something new that I suddenly thought, oh, this sounds good. I saw this coaching qualification advertised on the internet, and I thought, that seems to be similar to what I'm doing. So I became more interested in exploring it a bit deeper. And I realized that, yeah, for years I've been fighting against the education system and trying to get my learners to be more autonomous, to be more involved in the process of because it is their own learning. You know, it's not my learning. And I see myself more as a guide and a facilitator than somebody who stuffs them full of information to to then just reproduce in an exam and then to later forget. So So yeah, like I said, I think the coaching has always been there with me. It's part of who I am and the values that I have regarding education. But yeah, it just became, it just, I suppose it was confirmed when I qualified as a neuro language coach that, yeah, this is something worth doing. Sorry, that was a very long introduction.
Well, it's interesting. So for you then, as a presumably you're also a trained kind of classroom teacher from your days of being a French teacher. So you've got a really wide range of qualifications and experience. What do you think that how do you think that coaching has affected or influenced your teaching style?
Yeah, well, I would say the biggest influence is that I see it as a much more holistic process. It's much more about, sorry, it's much more than teaching just the language, teaching words, vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation. I see it as teaching, not teaching actually. I see it as giving learners an opportunity to explore and discover the language, but also to explore themselves as learners. So, you know, what kind of learner they are. How do they like to learn? How can they use that to help them? And also, not just about exploring the self, and, you know, and how we feel about language learning and, how we can manage our emotions to help us overcome blocks that we have, but also about learning how to learn. Because I think this is one of the biggest problems that, you know, we say to our students, okay, in the education system, we say, there's a test next week, you know, go off and learn the present simple and this list of vocabulary. You know, our students go away, you know, and some of them are very studious. They're very good students. They do what they're asked to do, but it's not effective because they don't know how to learn. They don't know how best to study vocabulary, how best to learn grammar. And, you know, even though they're making a big effort, they're not seeing the results that they should be seeing. So I think for me, coaching really has made it much more than about the language, but more about the self and teaching skills that they need to be learners in general.
And I know that when we first had a chat on Zoom a few weeks ago, because you teach in like the kind of mainstream education system, you said that sometimes students can be a little bit resistant to different techniques because they like the kind of give me the information, I'll go away, I'll put it in my brain, I'll do my test, and then that's my job as the student is over. So what benefits do you think coaching principles can bring to your students? Because sometimes it can seem that it requires a little bit more effort on the part of the student. You know, you talk about autonomy, but that means the student has to step up and be responsible. And sometimes they don't always want that. So what benefits do you think students get from this approach?
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly what you're saying. The resistance comes from making more effort. In the short term, as I think eventually they see the benefits in the long term, but yeah, you have to overcome that short term resistance, because it's so ingrained in students often that, you know, they're going to open the textbook and pass from one page to the next page, and it is very easy to do that. But I think we have to educate them in the sense of explaining to them why you're doing something different, why you're not doing that. So explaining, being transparent. explaining that, okay, we're not going to do this because it's going to be much more difficult to remember. But if we do it this way, it's going to take a bit more effort. But in the long run, it's going to be much better for you because it's going to take less effort. I know that one of your favorite systems is of learning vocabulary is the box system. With the spacing. Now, this takes effort in the first place. You know, you have to make your cards, you have to organize your boxes. It takes discipline. But when you start to see the results, that you're remembering more, so you don't have to study the same things over and over again, then actually you're saving time and effort. So I think it's trying to help students become aware of the benefits. So not just saying to them, we're doing this because this is how I do it. We're doing this for a reason, because for you, it's going to be better.
It's interesting that the kind of, I don't know if it's really a metaphor, but the kind of thing that popped up in my head as you were talking was it's a bit like a person who wants to lose weight. It's easy to do a crash diet for 4 days and lose that weight, but changing your eating habits takes discipline, and it's challenging, and it's because you have to go through withdrawal from sugar and fatty food and all that. But in the long run, changing your eating habits so they are healthy is much better than doing repeated crash diet where you just don't eat anything for 3 or 4 days and then go back to normal. So it's kind of, in a way, it's a little bit like that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you use the word habit, because I think when we become used to doing something, it does become a habit. And then we stop thinking about doing it because it's just part of who we are and what we do. So unfortunately, unless we work on showing our students or coaches that there are other ways of doing things, then, you know, we continue doing the same things that we've done since forever, because, you know, that's how we were taught to do it at school, for example, in the case of adults. I think also it's very important to give students a choice. So, you know, although there are some strategies that I believe are really good and work really well, they may not be the best strategies for some students. And I think it's important to give them, you know, a kind of menu of activities and strategies that they can try out. And if they don't like them, if they don't see results, if they don't work, then, you know, try something different. But not to get stuck in the rut of doing the same thing just because that's the way it's always been.
Definitely. So for you then, what would you say is the biggest problem you see among your students, and how do you help them to deal with that problem?
Yeah, I think I suppose if I'm thinking about adults, I would say one of the biggest problems is not language, actually. is more about confidence and beliefs that they have about learning a language, which often come from past learning experiences in the education systems that they've been through. Lots of my adult students are a similar age to me, actually. And, you know, when we share our experience of learning a language at school, it's very similar. I can see you're raising your head. And, you know, these ideas stay with us. It's very difficult unless somebody gives us space to talk about it and to reflect, then they stay with us there in the back of our minds, you know. So if somebody told us that, you know, we weren't a good language learner, you know, you're not going to learn a language because you're much better at science or you're much better at maths, you should stick with that. That stays in your head, you know. I was a very shy student and I loved languages, but I wasn't very confident. And, you know, my teachers would just say to me, you know, speak more, you need to speak more. And, but, you know, they never really helped me to know how would it be easier for me to speak more? What could I do to help myself? So I would say confidence is a big issue, beliefs that we have about past learning experiences, and talking about maybe the adolescents and adults learning how to learn, not knowing how to learn. So, you know, you're kind of a bit in the wilderness. Okay, you can have, you know, 10 out of 10 motivation to learn a language. But if you don't know where to start, it's very difficult, and you get demotivated very quickly because you don't see results. So, you know, not knowing the best ways to learn. I find neuroscience fascinating. You know, finding out now there's so much information about how our brain likes to learn, and giving that information to students is very empowering. You know, obviously when we're talking about kids or adolescents, you have to speak in a language that they understand. But you can drip feed small things in about how the brain likes to learn and what's good for us. You know, with my adolescents, they set their termly goals, and they set actions, you know, for those goals. Maybe they want to, I don't know, they want to improve their vocabulary because they don't have you know, a big vocabulary. So they set a goal this term. I'm going to, you know, work on my vocabulary. And then they set actions. What are they going to do specifically? Okay, so they're going to watch 5 minutes of their favorite series on Netflix and listen for any new vocabulary that might be interesting to note down and then to try and use. You know, these are very simple things we can try to, you know, make our students aware of. And like you said, there's a lot of resistance in the beginning. It's an effort to set a goal and to think about it, and but they get used to it, and I think in the long term they'll see the benefits.
And what's one more interesting thing about you and your work, do you think?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, I think, is for me and for my students and my coachees, is that all these things that I talk about are not just things that I've suddenly seen on the internet one day and thought, oh, that sounds good. That looks like a good idea. It's years and years of reflection and self-observation, not just as a teacher, but as a language learner myself. So, you know, over the years, I've watched myself and see the problems that I've had. And, you know, as I've got older, and I've learned the skills such as, you know, reflection, self-reflection, self-regulation. Now I can see how I can help my students and my learners from both perspectives, as a teacher and coach, or you know, as a language learner, because I've learned lots of languages to different degrees over the years, with some more successful than others, and you know, for various reasons. And I feel that I can use all of that information to help my learners. I actually recently, it became clear in my head, all these years of observation and reflection, and I put a name to it, and I called it the fluency puzzle. So I believe there are 4 things that you need to really feel confident and fluent in a language, which is the language, which is usually where it stops quite often in the education system, and then a kind of roadmap, an action plan, you know, goals, focus, habits, strategies. The third thing is self-awareness, thinking about our motivation, our mindset, are we in the right place? And finally, a community. And I think this is sometimes that learners quite often feel alone, that they're doing this on their own, they don't know where to go. and a community can really help. That is, you know, a support network. So, so yeah.
Oh wow, it's fascinating. It's really interesting. My mum was telling me yesterday about someone that she knows who's got a sister or something who lives in France. There's, you know, a grown up, an adult, and this person has lived in France for years and has a business and a job and a husband and is very, very successful and fluent in French. And when this person was at school, they were told by their teachers, you are really terrible at French and you should quit. And it just goes to show how much rubbish is put into our heads when we are at school by well-meaning people. But as adults, we cannot let those things define us and what we choose to do because it's rubbish.
No, and I think that it's so important that, you know, we take a step back from the language first and think about, you know, think about ourselves. And I think it then, you know, it's like I say, I think often the problem is not the language at all. We find our students do have the language, they just don't have the confidence, or they have these beliefs which hold them back and stop them from using the language they have. So I think that's kind of the idea of our sessions, isn't it?
Definitely,
To
definitely.
try and help learners to bring an awareness to other ways of doing things, and to hopefully give some inspiration to learners to try things. And, you know, if it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work for them. But, you know, to have a bigger menu, let's say,
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
just one meal on the menu.
Mm. Cool. So I guess we've kind of got similar backgrounds in a lot of ways. I never did like classroom teaching, so I never learned how to teach a language in schools here. My dad was a teacher, and he advised very strongly never to become a teacher. So I didn't do that. But for me, I started language teaching when I lived in Thailand, and I had gone traveling with my partner at the time, and we were basically just spending too much money. And we got to Bangkok and we were like looking at the bank account going, we don't want to go home yet. And it's very, or certainly at the time, it was very easy to just get a job as a teacher in a school. And that's what we did. And we had no experience, no qualifications, nothing. And it kind of just built up from there. So it wasn't ever really a decision that I made for my career. But because I liked living abroad and I liked being in Asia and I liked kind of integrating into cultures a bit more, I ended up staying in Asia for about 10 years, teaching and traveling and teaching and traveling. And then when I came back to the UK, which is 7 years ago now, I started teaching in the language schools here, and I didn't really like it very much, you know. So I've been teaching online for about 4 years now, and now it's mostly one-to-one. I also have a kind of group speaking club that I do, and in the last kind of couple of years, I've also qualified as a coach, and I've got lots more training that I want to do in this kind of area of our mindset and our beliefs and how they impact on how well people can speak and use their second language.
Yeah, I'm really interested in your work as all around anxiety, because I think, you know, this is it's like I say, it's one of these beliefs that one of all these beliefs that students have, you know, is often linked to anxiety, and that's what stops them, not the language. So I think, yeah, I really like that work that you're doing on, you know, working out their around their anxiety to, I suppose, to free the language, isn't it?
Mm.
Mhm.
And I think with anxiety, it's really, really hard. Like I had a student once and she was French and she was probably in her 50s. And she was a professor at it wasn't a school, but it wasn't a university. It was somewhere in the middle. And she was applying for the next level up. And because of her age and things, she felt that it was her last opportunity. She had really good English, like her writing was great, her reading was great, her, listening, the vocabulary, the grammar was all fantastic. But she had a very, 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 very strong French accent, and she hated it. Like the kind of self-hate that she directed at herself because of her accent was really quite unbelievable to me watching her. Um, and in the end, although we worked really hard on her pronunciation, because she had had this accent for such a long time, you can't undo all that in 4 months. No matter how much you work, those habits are ingrained in your language, and it takes a long time to unpick them. And unfortunately for her, that anxiety and shame actually around her accent, in the end, they stopped her. And it's really sad to see that, because there's nothing wrong with her language at all. But because of what is going on up here, she gave up. And I always feel that is a tragedy for those people.
Yeah. And the sad thing is that, you're talking about one student, but it's so common.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, coaching is a really, really good way to learn a language, rather than, taking out your books and working your way through your books alone. I think it's, coaching can really help students to progress. Hopefully that's what we'll do in our in this little mini series. We'll help people to see that there are other ways, and give them some ideas that they can try out.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the whole thing that we'd like to get across. So for me, I work a lot with goal setting with my students. Even as adults, I think people really struggle with goals. And what's interesting, and something I've learned, is that this can be very culture specific. So I was working with a Russian student who is, again, about my age, so we're talking mid-40s. And we were working on goals, and the student said, well, this is really hard because in Russia we don't have to set goals because the state just looks after us. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really interesting. So because of the culture, there's no need to set a goal. And I'm guessing there's other countries where this is the same. So even something as kind of simple as setting a goal and deciding those action steps can be really, really challenging, even for adults.
Yeah.
And I've had, adult students where we're trying to make a study plan, and they say, well, what should I do? How should I do this? I'm thinking, you're 28, like, I don't know how you should do this. I don't know when you go to work, or, you need to figure that out. I'll help you, but I can't tell you how to do it. And for me, that's the big difference between coaching and teaching.
Yeah.
That traditional teaching model is, I'm going to give you information and I want you to go away and do something with it. But coaching is much more about empowering people to make their own decisions.
Yeah. And I do think it is difficult for people, because it's so ingrained to not do that, to not think for ourselves. I think it's really important, to go step by step. And it's like you said, making goals is not easy. And there are also lots of different ways of making goals. There are lots of different models out there. And, again, I think it's, helping students to see what can work for them, and, trying to help them bridge that gap in the first place between traditional education and other ways of doing things, and thinking outside of the box. Because it's not easy to think outside of the box.
It's not easy to think outside of the box. And I think that, we go through school and we kind of assume that all learning has to be like the learning we did at school. And I mean, if I look back at my French lessons, this is when I rolled my eyes. It's like, je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, And that's all I remember.
Yeah.
That is literally after 9 years of learning French. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
And the boredom and the frustration and just like thinking this is stupid. And as an adult, when I've wanted to learn a language, I've had to really think about, I don't want to sit there and learn grammar rules. That's boring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to do something so I can go and talk to people, or I can read something, or I can watch something. I don't want to sit here and remember past tenses. Not that that's not important.
No, no, there's definitely a place, you know, there's a place for learning, you know, for studying. And for me, you know, is the difference between, there are, you know, two kinds of learning. One is more conscious, one is less conscious. I think we need both kinds of learning, but I think often the problem is that sometimes students think that if they're only doing the conscious learning, studying the rules, studying the vocabulary, that's how we learn.
Mm.
Whereas that's not the case. You know,
No.
we learn by acquiring, you know, unconsciously language, by using it, by consuming it. But I think sometimes students are worried that they're not actually learning by doing that. You know, so I think it's, you know, finding a balance between the two, between the two kinds of learning, so that you know, the most progress can be made in the time that you have.
Definitely. So, we should probably think a little bit about our next video and what we might want to talk about in the next one. And you and I, Lisa, had an idea that we might ask the people who watch the video what they would like us to talk about. So I guess we're really looking for the problems that people have with maybe their study habits, maybe with their motivation, maybe with not getting the results that they want, and you know, that frustration, like what, you know, I'm working on this, why am I not getting what I need from it? Perhaps we might be looking at beliefs or feelings about using and studying a language, because it can be really challenging. So I guess what we would like from anyone who's watched this is maybe to know what would be most useful for you to learn from us. And just to be really clear, we're not going to be giving lessons on the past simple and past continuous, because you can get that stuff all over the internet. Yes. And we're really looking at the problems that you guys have with your actual studying, you know, organizing time, prioritizing, you know, if you're doing IELTS, you've got so much to do. How do you do it, or when do you do it, or how do you prioritize? What's more important, task one or task two? Like, how do I learn all this vocabulary for task one? Oh, it's a nightmare. Yeah, so what are your challenges with learning a language?
Absolutely. And I'm sure they will have some amazing ideas.
Definitely.
Which will inspire us for our next session.
Definitely. So if you have anything like this, you can leave this in the comments below. And remember, there's literally no such thing as a stupid question in anything, but definitely there is no such thing as a stupid question when you are learning a language. All questions are valid, 100%.
Absolutely.
Cool. So Lisa, it's been super nice chatting with you this morning.
Yeah, I think we've been chatting a bit longer than we intended, but
yeah, a little bit. So we're basically planning to make these, I'm not quite sure if we decided every week or every other week, but on a very, very regular basis on a Thursday morning. If you don't feel like putting a message in the comments, you can either message me direct. I'm sure Lisa is okay to have a message direct as well.
Yep.
Cool. And yeah.
Yes, we'll be back.
We will be back in very, very soon on a Thursday morning.
Yes. Okay.
All right, Lisa, have a great day. Everyone who watched, thank you for watching, and see you guys again soon.
Yeah, great day to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.